This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
عودة إلى أخبارنا. انتقدت الخارجية الإسرائيلية بشدة إصدار محكمة.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry released a statement criticizing the issuance by a British court of an arrest warrant for Israeli opposition leader Tzipi Livni on war crimes charges. It warned that if the British government does not take immediate and decisive actions to correct this mistake, that the bilateral relations between the two countries will be affected. The statement indicated that the inability of Israeli leaders to visit Britain will prevent London from playing an active role in the Middle East peace process.
نشيط في عملية السلام في الشرق الأوسط.
ليس لدي اعتراض على أن العالم يريد أن يحاسب.
I'm not opposed to the fact that the world wants to hold Israel accountable. We are part of the free world. The problem is that the world is not implementing its principles in our region. I'm not talking about the soldiers who are fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan in the war on terrorism, but about equating Israeli soldiers to terrorists.
للتعليق على هذا الموضوع المتطور منذ بداية هذا اليوم معنا مباشرة من القدس.
Dr. Mohammed Dahlan joins us to comment on this ongoing development. He's a professor of international law at the Hebrew University.
لكونك مختصا في القانون الدولي وفي الشؤون القضائية والقانونية أسألك أولا
As someone who specializes in international law, what does international law say about issuing an arrest warrant for a former official in a foreign country? Can British courts arrest Livni based on this warrant?
على هذا الشخص اعتمادا على مذكرة من هذا الشكل.
بداية للتصحيح أنا محامي ولست دكتور في القانون وبالنسبة لسؤالك الجواب هو بسيط.
First of all, I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. The answer to your question is simple. In the last decades, international law was changed to make it possible for courts to try people on foreign soil if they've committed war crimes, crimes against humanity, mass murder, or have violated international law during a war. These kinds of crimes are treated like domestic ones.
دول أو في محاكم وطنية لدول مختلفة تعتبر هذه الجرائم كجرائم محلية وفق القانون المحلي أو مقاضاتهم في بعض الأحيان.
Also, they can be tried at the International Criminal Court. It has been done before.
نحن نعلم أن تقرير جولدستون الذي صدر مؤخرا والذي أشار إلى إمكانية ارتكاب إسرائيل والمسؤولين الإسرائيليين.
We know that the Goldstone report that accused Israeli officials of having committed different war crimes has become the legal foundation for charges recently brought against Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak and the arrest warrant for Tzipi Livni, who was the foreign minister during the war on Gaza.
التي كانت أثناء الحرب على غزة وزيرة الخارجية الإسرائيلية. بالتالي توجد صلاحية.
So some countries that gave their courts jurisdiction to try war criminals, such as Britain, Spain, and Belgium, can try foreign officials.
بلجيكا ودول أخرى في العالم.
Our top story, tensions escalate between right-wing activists and the defense establishment. This following Defense Minister Ehud Barak's decision to remove the Har Bracha Yeshiva from the arrangement with the IDF. Barak decided to abolish the Hesder agreement with the Yeshiva after its head, Rabbi Elazar Melamed, failed to attend a hearing scheduled between the two last night and refused to condemn insubordination. Right-wing activists are now threatening to encourage students to leave the Hesder program and put off their enlistment to the army. IBA's Dennis Zinn has the details.
Angry right-wing activists today said that they'll respond harshly to the defense minister's decision to punish the Har Bracha military yeshiva. Some graduates of the program said that they are going to boycott reserve duty until the decision is revoked. Last night, after Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, the head of the institution, refused to meet Defense Minister Ehud Barak to review relations between the IDF and the yeshiva, Barak ordered the Defense Ministry to stop funding the yeshiva and to strike it from the list of military academies. Barak said Melamed routinely encourages his students to disobey orders and to demonstrate in public. These acts, he said, damage the esprit de corps and the fighting spirit of the entire army. Over the last few months, there were a series of protests by Yeshivot Hesder cadets in uniform, declaring their refusal to obey orders if and when they are called on to evacuate settlements in Judea and Samaria. Rabbi Melamed today said that his snubbing of Barak was due to his wish to remain an independent religious authority. He said that rabbis have to follow their own conscience and not the orders of the defense minister. Almost all the heads of the 40 Yeshivot Hesder have come out in support of Rabbi Melamed, although several have privately said Melamed had crossed a red line. Sources in the IDF today said that the heads of the religious and military academies must understand that an army cannot have two chains of command. Soldiers have to know that it is their commander who issues the order and that the order has to be obeyed. The sources said that being able to combine compulsory military service with religious study is a privilege which will be cancelled if it interferes with the operation of the army. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Gilad Shalit will not see the light of day until Israel answers all of our demands and releases all of the prisoners on our list. That was the official announcement from the Hamas terror organization as thousands of its supporters gathered in Gaza to mark the group's 22nd anniversary. IBA's Michelle Kaplan has the story.
Tens of thousands of Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza today to mark the 22nd anniversary of the founding of the Hamas terror group. Crowds waved Hamas flags, wore green hats and scarves, and held posters and flags in celebration of the terrorist regime. Hamas announced that there will be no chance for captured soldier Gilad Shalit to be released unless Israel frees hundreds of Palestinian prisoners and complies with all of the group's demands. Addressing the crowd, Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh claimed victory for last winter's war with Israel. He said that those who planned the military offensive cast lead did not imagine that Hamas will celebrate its anniversary with such a grand event. Haniyeh went on to describe the results of the military offensive and vowed that the terror group will never recognize Israel. Haniyeh also issued calls to Fatah for the renewal of talks between the two sides. He said reconciliation of Hamas and Fatah would lead to the establishment of a new joint platform that will call for the foundation of a Palestinian state based on the 67 borders and the Palestinian right of return. Today's large turnout was expected by Hamas to refute the claim that it had lost much of its credibility and support among Palestinians in the aftermath of the war. This is Michelle Kaplan for IBA News.
Palestinian sources report the clashes broke out between IDF forces and residents of the West Bank village of Yusuf, where a mosque was torched last Friday, allegedly by Jewish extremists. According to the Palestinians, the clashes erupted during a visit by Knesset member Talib al-Sana of the United Arab List Tal, who came to tour the site in a show of solidarity. They claim soldiers fired rubber bullets and tear gas at stone throwers. The IDF and border guard denied the reports and said that stones were hurled at an army jeep that entered to patrol the area. No injuries were reported.
A London court issued an arrest warrant against opposition leader Tzipi Livni for alleged war crimes during Operation Cast Lead last winter. That word today from the Al Jazeera network. It was also reported that Livni canceled a planned trip to England scheduled for this week. Out of concern, she would be detained. Sources in Livni's office say the visit was canceled 2 weeks ago due to time constraints. They said Livni had received no official notice that any arrest warrant had been issued. They added that the opposition leader stood behind all of her decisions taken during the military offensive.
The new Jordanian government took the oath yesterday, and both old and new faces promised to achieve the desired reforms at the political, economic, and social levels. However, the fact that the new government still has old faces holding important ministerial positions raised questions about the amount of change that the new government can actually bring about, especially since the Jordanian parliament will have elections next year. Salwa Sawaka reports from Jordan.
After the new government of Samir al-Rafai was sworn in the presence of the Jordanian king, they began governing Jordan. The government, which has 28 ministers and is led by a young prime minister, will have to amend the country's election law before the parliamentary elections. Based on the new election law, they were postponed until next fall. This will not be the government's only duty. Jordanian citizens expect it to make decisions and create policies to resolve their problems, especially poverty and unemployment, and to improve their quality of life.
We have a deficit of $780 to $790 billion. A great deal of effort is needed to decrease the debt.
We only ask that they have mercy in their hearts.
The new government includes experienced ministers and young talented individuals. The executive ministers stayed in their posts, especially the foreign, interior, and information ministers. Despite the mixture between experienced officials and young professionals, political observers still do not think that the new government is much different than the old one.
The government was supposed to be harmonious, but it has a mixture of people who have contradictory political ideologies. I do not know how this government will be harmonious and how it can work as one team, considering the contradictory ideologies and politics of its ministers.
Governments come and go based on royal decrees and in accordance with the country's constitution. Governments are dissolved and formed for different reasons, but the royal guidance is what determines the policy of every new government. Al-Rafai's government faces many political and economic challenges, including the challenge of reforming the country's electoral law before the parliamentary elections and finding ways to decrease the deficit. Salwa Sawaka, Dubai Television, Amman.
In Kabul, a suicide attack has killed 5 Afghan police officers and injured dozens. The attack targeted the residence of former Vice President Ahmed Zia Massoud and his brother, the late leader Ahmed Shah Massoud.
A government source said that Ahmed Zia's assistant was killed in the attack.
In a different development, a conference on fighting corruption started in Kabul. President Hamid Karzai attended the conference. The 3-day conference is considered to be the first official step taken by the Afghan president since he was sworn into office a month ago for a second term after a controversial election.
Karzai is under international pressure, especially from the U.S., to fight corruption.
The plans to eliminate corruption and to establish programs to restore civil development have not had much impact in Afghanistan.
In the suburbs of the Afghani capital, the building of a 9-kilometer-long road was halted 4 years ago. The road costs $10 million.
Al Jazeera's correspondent Steve Chow investigated the issue and brought us the following report.
Here in the suburbs of Kabul, a 9-kilometer-long road was supposed to be finally paved. With that hope, residents and businessmen of this region believe that their fate will turn around and that their lives will become easier. 4 years later, it has become clear that the ambitious project was nothing but another disappointment in a country plagued by corruption.
This is an example of the widespread corruption. The project was supposed to take only 6 months, but where did the money go?
The project remains but a picture on this banner. It was relegated to the Huwad Wall Company at the expense of about $10 million. The residents of the area say that the construction work lasted for several months, then stopped. Not far away, we met the accountant of the company, who rejected our interview and demanded that we stop filming. A day later, we went to the headquarters of Huwad Wall, and the general manager agreed to talk with us. He told us that the company received $6 out of the $10 million, and that the contract stipulated that the work should be halted if problems arise.
We are ready to resume the work any time, but the city's authorities do not pay local residents for them to move from the project zone. As long as they don't do that, we cannot build the road.
This excuse was denied by the construction official in Kabul. But he acknowledges the lack of a system of accountability for the contractors, a reality in Afghanistan for decades.
I should say not enough.
I should say, not enough. When there is a system in place to monitor the projects, things cannot go wrong.
The living conditions here remain the same, maybe even worse. The dream of a new road has evaporated, just like the dreams of many for a better life after the collapse of the Taliban.
اعتبرت إيران أن التقرير الاستخباراتي الذي أوردته صحيفة تايمز
Iran considers the intelligence report by the British newspaper The Times to be a fabricated scenario on Iran's testing of an important component to produce nuclear bombs.
ونشر تايمز أن طهران تقوم بأنشطة تهدف إلى إجراء تجارب على عنصر رئيسي.
The Times referred to an Iranian document that shows that Iran is working on a key component of a nuclear bomb.
بين الشك واليقين ثار جدل كبير حول أحدث التقارير الاستخباراتية السرية التي
In between doubt and certainty, major controversy was aroused by the latest secret intelligence report indicating that Iran is about to produce a nuclear bomb. The evidence is that Tehran is engaged in testing a neutron initiator, a major element of a nuclear bomb that triggers an explosion. Diplomatic and technical sources believe that the locally produced part in the Iranian nuclear experiment is neither for civilian nor traditional military use, but appears to be extremely similar to one in a nuclear weapon.
لافتة إلى أن التطبيقات خطيرة للغاية لأنها تعني أن إيران تقترب أكثر من
The sources indicated that the implications of these activities are very dangerous as they support evidence that Iran is getting closer to producing nuclear weapons. The International Atomic Energy Agency refused to comment on the Times report, but it indicated that this information would be added to the intelligence gathering on Iran's affairs that they are receiving from a number of countries, including the US, the UK, and Israel. Iran, the fifth largest oil exporter in the world, stressed that its nuclear program aims at generating electricity in order to export more oil and natural gas. Iran said that the goal of the report is to put political and psychological pressure on the Islamic Republic.
Some of these angry countries are putting pressure on us by fabricating these scenarios, but the Iranian people defend their nuclear rights and have come a long way.
أحدث تقرير مخابراتي أمريكي عن إيران صدر قبل عامين.
The latest U.S. intelligence report on Iran was released 2 years ago after verifying that Tehran had stopped its weapons program in 2003. But this assessment was not accepted by Britain, France, Germany, and Israel.
دبلوماسيون إن تقييما حديثا للمخابرات الأمريكية بشأن إيران في طور الإعداد.
Diplomats say that a new assessment of the U.S. intelligence report on Iranian affairs is under preparation and scheduled to be completed soon.
البيت الأبيض للأمن القومي الجنرال جيمس جونز بأنه يبقى أمام إيران.
This coincides with the statements made by National Security Advisor to the White House, General James Jones, that Iran has 1 month to reconsider its position on the nuclear issue and that it might face a new round of international sanctions.
According to security sources, 4 police officers were martyred in an armed attack in Abu Ghraib. According to the same sources, unknown armed men killed 4 police officers in the early hours of the morning by opening fire on them. The police officers had set up a checkpoint in order to secure the main vegetable market in Abu Ghraib. Meanwhile, in Kirkuk, 2 police officers were martyred when a roadside bomb exploded as their vehicle was passing by. Also, 1 soldier was martyred on his way to work when armed men opened fire on him from a speeding car. In a separate incident, Iraqi police said that a Sahwa member was killed and another 3, including a commander, were injured in an explosion. The target of the explosion was a Sahwa patrol unit near Wadi al-Khanjar, southwest of Kirkuk. Armed groups have been gaining strength in Al-Karama in Anbar province, especially after last week's attacks on 5 checkpoints. The local council complained about the lack of security coordination between the Sahwa and the security forces. Sahwa forces continue to be arrested and their demands have not been met yet. We'll leave you with a report of Kamal Ayyash.
Security leadership in the Anbar province confirmed that the police and the army are coordinating their efforts, but officials in Al-Karma city and Al-Anbar province say that there is no coordination between the different security leaderships, which explains the return of armed groups. These groups are using the security gap created by the lack of coordination between the many security leaderships in Al-Karama.
Explosions happen in Al-Karama almost every day or every other day. Some forces come from outside and arrest people, but no one knows where they go. We have received many complaints from citizens whose sons were arrested, but they are unable to locate them or they do not know who arrested them.
In addition to the lack of security coordination, out of the 1,800 police officers serving in Al-Anbar province, only 400 are assigned with the protection of a city that extends from Baghdad to Al-Anbar and Salahuddin provinces. A number of Sahwa council members who complain about not receiving their salaries and benefits are supposed to support the security forces. However, they are now unable to provide daily necessities for their families.
The Karama district is the largest in Iraq. It is adjacent to several other provinces such as Salahuddin, Baghdad, Abu Ghraib, and Samarra. It needs more police, weapons, and equipment in order for the security forces to counter the threats.
We have been serving for 4 years. We have not received our salaries. The salary of Sahwa members is 1,500 dinars. In the beginning, we had a tribal arrangement, but up until now, we have not received administrative order to legitimize our status or salaries from the city. The Americans used to give us salaries, but now we are not receiving anything.
Coordinating security operations and developing security forces in Al-Anbar is an urgent matter, especially since the acts of violence increased.
The Lebanese Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri, said that the growing pressure on Hezbollah over its weapons will not force Lebanon into abandoning the resistance movement and its arms. This news comes as the Lebanese president is on a visit to Washington.
The pressure on the resistance over its weapons, including the conditions imposed by members of the U.S. Congress on the supply of weapons to the Lebanese army, will not force Lebanon to abandon the resistance and its arms. This coincides with the visit to Washington by His Excellency the President of the Republic, General Michel Suleiman. The resistance is a necessary and an important element to the Lebanese constituent. This will be the case as long as the Israeli occupation remains in parts of our beloved country, including the Shebaz farms and the Kafr Shuba hills, and as long as Israel continues to violate Lebanese sovereignty and threaten to use force against Lebanon, including the latest threats that were issued by the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu.
The president of the Lebanese Republic, Michel Suleiman, visited Washington and met with President Barack Obama, generating a heated political campaign. Some have criticized the president's visit and questioned its objective and timing. However, Lebanese Member of Parliament Ahmad Fatfat expressed shock over the controversy that the visit has generated. In an interview with Future TV, Fatfat said that these types of practices will not help improve the Syrian-Lebanese relations.
The criticism voiced by Syria's allies in Lebanon has brought back the memory of encrypted messages, which Syria had long used as a way to correspond with loyalist groups in Lebanon. In 2005, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad stood at the podium of the People's Assembly and acknowledged that his country has committed mistakes in Lebanon and intervened in Lebanese internal affairs.
We must acknowledge clearly and transparently that mistakes were committed in the Lebanese arena. We got involved in some of the details and measures in the country. On some occasions, we were compelled to engage with some Lebanese at the expense of others.
4 years after Assad delivered the speech, the Syrian regime has started to re-adopt the same policy. This shows that members of the Assad regime have not learned from their historical mistakes.
I'm surprised by these criticisms, which are out of context. One of the most important roles of His Excellency, President of the Lebanese Republic, is to take part in foreign policies and to represent his country in the international community. I believe that all types of engagements with the world, with the exception of Israel, are necessary and serve Lebanese interests.
Did the usage of encrypted messages come back in the spotlight as a way to communicate with Lebanon and its officials?
The use of this method will not have any effect on the Lebanese internal front. In the past, His Excellency President Bashar Assad said that mistakes were committed in Lebanon. These political practices are part of the mistakes that Syria has committed in Lebanon. These practices will not help improve Syrian-Lebanese relations, and they will take us a step backward.
Observers believe that these recent messages show that the Syrian administration doesn't want to recognize Lebanon as a sovereign and independent country and wants to take Lebanon back to the period before 2005.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.